Welcome everybody to another stream here. Oh my gosh, I put it in blue still. I need to get my stuff together. We're gonna go to red here real quick. Was that the West Virginia crew on? Anyways, we got some red now finally. But anyways, welcome everybody to another episode of Iowa State Cyclones Live here on the Voice of College Football Network. I am Levi Stevenson. You may be familiar with me from Wide Right and Natty Light. If not, everybody, thank you for joining in. I know Iowa State fans. I know we are currently in a tight basketball game down in Orlando against UCF. So I am fully aware of that. I understand if you guys are paying attention to that, but if you are watching, I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Got a few things this week. It's a fairly light news week, but couple things did come up, and I think that are worth discussing here. Iowa State had an offensive assistant move on to the NFL. We'll talk about him a little bit, and really actually talk a little bit more about the broader Matt Campbell coaching tree, which is starting to really branch out and gain some volume. And then we're going to go through a little bit of a recruiting update. I still got a couple late commits to the 2025, late additions to the 2025 class, including a really interesting running back that is worth that we're going to take a little bit of a look at. And then just a kind of a primer for the 2026 class, because that's really the class that they're getting started on this spring. You know, they're doing their visits this spring, you know, when they can. Well, like, don't think they can visit right now. It's not, I think it's a dead period right now, but they're really starting on the 2026 recruiting right now. So we're going to go through those just a little bit too. And then obviously, you know, throughout the whole stream, if you guys have any questions at all about anything I'm talking about, anything about Iowa State, whatever it is about me, I guess, certainly more than happy to answer those. It's kind of a perpetual Q&A session. So I'm more than happy to answer any questions that come up during the stream. So, appreciate everybody tuning in again. So we're first off, the main thing that happened this week, and I think it wasn't anything particularly surprising, is running backs coach Tyler Roehl is headed to the Detroit Lions to join Dan Campbell's staff in Detroit. This is a move that I can't say shocks me a lot. There was a lot of talk throughout the whole season, just kind of about Iowa State's running scheme and some of the different the different running game packages they were able to develop for a power runner like Carson Hansen, and more of a finesse runner like Abu, and a home run hitter like Abu Sama, and trying to find some success in that. So he got a lot of praises, especially within the coaching community throughout the season, for his ability to scheme up the run game. And we also saw Noah Pauley, the wide receivers coach, get interviewed by the 49ers for their offensive coordinator position. I don't know how, I don't think necessarily that was a particularly serious interview, because I think the general thought is they were already going to bring in Kubiak, who they hired. But, you know, even getting interviewed for that, even in a maybe less than serious capacity, is still notable, though, because it means that the NFL has an eye on you and means that they're looking. But Tyler Roehl did get the call up to join Dan Campbell's staff, I believe, as an assistant coach up there as well. Iowa State, he was the running backs coach and the running game coordinator, so he worked with Taylor Mauser on the offense as the offensive coordinator, as well as Ryan Clanton, who's the offensive line coach, coordinating what was actually a fairly creative run game. It wasn't necessarily a run. It wasn't a run game that was, going off for 250 yards a game or anything like that. They weren't doing what like UCF was doing, anything like that. They were very much a balanced offense, but what they did try to do in the running game was fairly successful, and they were pretty good at being creative about getting guys in space. Their short yardage stuff was really good. We saw them institute a Maryland eye this year, which was really, really interesting. And that's something that even though Tyler Roehl has now moved on, that's still something that is in the playbook, and that Ryan Clanton and Taylor Mauser and Matt Campbell, they can continue to use that going forward. So it's an important tool. But what, it sucks to lose. It's unfortunate to lose a really, really talented assistant like Tyler Roehl, but you're not losing him to another Big 12 school. You're not losing him to an SEC school. You are losing him to the NFL. And if your head coach is hiring assistants that NFL teams want, that's a big deal. And this is obviously not the first time we saw Nate Scheelhaas, who got hired to the St. Louis Rams to work under Sean McVay as an offensive analyst. And I believe, if I remember correctly, Nate Scheelhaas was actually also connected to an offensive coordinator position this offseason. I want to look that up and just make sure I'm pretty sure he was connected to an offensive coordinator job this season. But it would not shock me if he gets the call up, sooner rather than later to be an offensive coordinator somewhere. I don't, once you're kind of in the NFL, you don't see them come back to college, unless it's for like a head coaching spot, which, I mean, like Illinois is going to be good next year. We're going to be good, so it's kind of one of those things I don't think he would just come back for any job. I think he would probably be either Iowa State or his alma mater, to be a head coach. Neither of those jobs are going to be open for 2026. So, I don't think he's coming back anytime soon. So he's probably going to be following the NFL route, but that's a big deal to have that coaching tree. And like I said, I'll talk about more of that in a little bit, but Tyler Roehl is headed to the Detroit Lions. So Iowa State will have to replace its running game coordinator, its running backs coach. One name I think maybe is worth at least paying attention to, I think, is Iowa State's former running back Sheldon Croney. I believe he was just hired at Central Michigan to be their running backs coach. So he is, let me just check here. I'm pretty sure it was Central Michigan, but he was like just hired because he was actually on staff this season as like a grad assistant. So it wouldn't, that's a name worth paying attention to anyways, is to see if they bring him back to be the running backs coach. Maybe he might be a little young right now, and they may want him to get some experience at a MAC school like Central Michigan. But it's a name worth keeping an eye on. But like most head coaches, I think Matt Campbell has kind of a list of people that he likes for different positions, or he's worked with, or has heard good things about. So no matter what, I'm very confident that Matt Campbell will hire someone very competent to fill that role. I'm not worried about that. Not worried about that coaching position whatsoever. But like I said, the larger point I think is really interesting here, though, is that the Matt Campbell coaching tree is expanding pretty quickly. It started out, the first ones we really saw, I think the first major one we saw where you saw him branch out and go and really start working his way up the ladder was probably Alex Golish, who was a tight ends coach here and then left and became the offensive coordinator at UCF. Yes, at UCF. And then eventually moved up, became Tennessee's offensive coordinator under Josh Heupel, did a really great job there, and is now currently the coach at South Florida. And I think the thought is that he's going to continue to be kind of a rising star in the coaching ranks. So that was kind of the first major one to break out. But we've seen other guys too. Like I said, Nate Scheelhaas is the kind of another big one, is with the Rams, and he's probably going to be an NFL offensive coordinator. I think in the fairly near future, or a college head coach. But I think now that he's already in the NFL, I'm thinking he's probably going to stay up there and try to get to an NFL offensive coordinator type role. And now you've got other guys too that are starting to branch out. Now you've got Tyler Roehl in the NFL, working with the Detroit Lions. That sucks because he was just really great running game coordinator, but Iowa State will be able to fill that role. Whether it's pulling up a guy from the FCS, because Tyler Roehl came from North Dakota State, who's known for having a good running game. So maybe you pull up from something like that. You can go around to different places and find a good option there. But no matter what, getting this coaching tree out there is valuable. It's kind of hard to see the immediate value, as far as like, you're not going to like put Nate Scheelhaas in the NFL with the Rams, or Tyler Roehl in the NFL with the Lions, and recruits are like, oh, Iowa State is sending assistant coaches to the NFL. I need to go there. But what it does is it gets Iowa State's name out there, and it helps kind of legitimize the program in the NFL. And I think the NFL takes Iowa State seriously as a football program. I mean, they've put a number of good players into the NFL recently. Obviously, Breece Hall and Alan Lazard and TJ Tampa and Charlie Kohler and Dave Montgomery. And this year they're going to have Jaden Higgins and Jalen Knoll and Darian Porter and a number of guys that are going to have a good shot at making NFL rosters and being impact contributors in the NFL. And I think the NFL is taking Iowa State seriously as a program already, but the more guys that you put in the NFL, the more coaches that you put in the NFL that have Iowa State ties, the better, because the more the NFL accepts you as a good program, the more guys that they're going to take from your program, knowing that they're getting good coaching at the college level. And the more guys you can put in the NFL, the better it looks for recruits. Say, hey, we can put this in the NFL. And it's also visibility. I forgot Brock Purdy, obviously. But you get more visibility for the program at the pro level. Obviously, the NFL is, as widely viewed as college football is, the NFL is obviously even a much bigger entity than college football is even. So having the visibility of Iowa State at the highest level, across a number of franchises is really, really important to sort of Iowa State establishing itself as a strong contender going forward, and as a team that is not just we're up for a little bit right now, but as a program that can continue to build and continue to kind of rise the ranks in terms of prestige within not only the Big 12 conference, but with, at the national level as well. In the conference right now, I think Iowa State is generally considered, it's earned the reputation at this point to be considered one of the year in, year out, top, top group, or, second group as far as contenders for the Big 12 title on their back. Well, they've earned that reputation, not just with Iowa State fans, but across the league, as being just a competitive team year in, year out, that's always going to be, pushing for a bid to the conference title game, well into November, well into October and into November, or even, into December even. So, but, outside of the Big 12, it's harder to establish that reputation, because obviously, the Big 12 is always competing with the SEC and the Big 10 as far as image goes, just, to not let those two conferences delegitimize the Big 12, or attempt to delegitimize the Big 12 and say, we are here and you are way down here. Having teams that can be competitive in the playoff is going to be immeasurably important for the Big 12 going forward. So when you can have more programs that legitimize themselves at the NFL level and within the conference and at the national level, and say, this is a program that is worth taking seriously. You look at, there's other programs in other conferences that are just, they kind of get the benefit of the doubt. And when you're a program that can earn the benefit of the doubt, that helps you in preseason polls. And when it helps you in preseason polls, it helps you in college football playoff polls. And when it helps you in college football playoff polls, it helps you get to the postseason. And I'm a staunch believer that your preseason ranking should have literally nothing to do with what your week 10 ranking is. That's just kind of the world we live in, unfortunately. And that's just kind of the game that we have to play. So earning your way into the status of being a program that is given the benefit of the doubt and is taken seriously, even without necessarily, having to go out and go 6-0 to start the season, is huge. And Matt Campbell expanding his coaching tree is one of the many moving parts to making that happen. So I think it's a big deal that we can continue to do that. There's other guys, like I said, Noah Pauley got a interview with the 49ers to be the offensive coordinator. Like I said, I don't think that was really I don't think he really had a shot to get the job necessarily, but he's on the radar of NFL teams. And because he's on the radar of NFL teams, he's also on the radar of college teams. Now, knowing that he is desired by NFL teams, that may mean that he's just going to wait at Iowa State until he gets the NFL job he wants. Because I think that's a perfectly reasonable option for somebody like that. Because Iowa State's a good program and that can establish a good running game. And it's, you can build your reputation here until the NFL's like, yes, we'll take you down. Because like I said, Iowa State is building a reputation as a quality program in the NFL. So he can stay at Iowa State another couple of years if he really wants to, and then jump up after that. And honestly, the 2025 season is a great time for Noah Pauley to do that, because you're bringing in Xavier Townsend and Chase Soule as two big transfer receivers, and you're breaking in a couple other new guys that didn't play a lot last season, that transferred in last season or just didn't play a lot, and you're losing 2,000-yard receivers. So if Iowa State can put together a really nice passing game this year with Rocco Becht and hopefully a decent offensive line, if you can have a couple really productive receivers as part of a good passing attack, that is, another feather in the cap for Noah Pauley, and say, look at this, I can take two guys that are going to be, day 2, day 3, early day 3, day 2, maybe day 1 pick in the case of Jaden Higgins. I can take 2,000-yard receivers and we can have a good time, or I can take 2 transfer receivers that have never been in the program and turn them into really good receivers, and you get that player development angle. And I think it's a really great opportunity for Noah Pauley to establish himself as being worthy of making the jump up to the league. And like I said, it's always tough when you lose those really great assistants. I know as Iowa State fans, we were all hoping we could hang on to Nate Scheelhaas in perpetuity because he's such a good football mind. But in the end, if your assistants are getting hired up to the NFL, that's a great sign that your head coach is doing a great job of managing your football program. So you have that. You have the 11-win season. Matt Campbell is doing an A-plus job at Iowa State. He will continue to do an A-plus job going forward. So, I said it's just kind of one piece of news, but it's a larger piece. It's a piece of a much larger puzzle as far as Iowa State establishing itself on the national stage. All right. So next up, I want to talk about the 2025 recruits that Iowa State hauled in. had a couple recent ones. I'm going to share my screen here real quick. So the main ones we got in here, the one that's particularly interesting to me, I mean, they're both interesting, but ones that are particularly interesting to me, we've got Jaden Jackson here. So Jaden Jackson is a running back from Texas. There's a couple reasons I think this is it's a notable signing. One, there's already a bit of a log jam in the running backs room because you've got Carson Hansen starting, and you've got Abu Sama's there currently, and you've got Dylan Lee is coming off of scholarship. You have the other running back of the 2025 class, which I believe his name is Peppers. Am I thinking right? Yes, River Peppers. Another running back that I was and am still very high on. So I think that's a guy that has a chance there. You've also got Aiden Flora, who also as a walk-on last year got some carries, even in I think he even got carries in the Pop-Tart Bowl. So he got significant carries through, or significant. He got a handful, but he got more than 0, and his carries didn't come in garbage time. So Aiden Flora is in the room, and all of those guys are still on the roster. So it makes sense to take one running back per class for sure. But this is now the second running back of the class, which you would not have expected to see Iowa State take a second running back this class, given the logjam in the room, unless one or maybe 2 things is happening. The main thing that I believe is happening here is that Jaden Jackson, maybe is an academic issue, maybe it was a late bloomer type thing, which seems a little unlikely because Jaden Jackson ran for over 8,000 yards in high school in Texas. In the state of Texas, he ran for over 8,000 yards. That is a lot of running. And you can watch, he's a power running back. See if I can blow this up and make this a little bit bigger. So you can see him here. He's running out of this kind of this heavy wishbone offense, kind of like Carson Hansen did, but you can see he runs with a lot of power. He's not necessarily a speed, like a home run hitter guy, but this is a guy that, like I said, this is a very similar offense to what, honestly, his tape looks a lot like Carson Hansen's did. Like I said, not super agile, not going to make a lot of guys miss, but he just doesn't go down easy. He just does a nice job finishing runs, coming off the edge here, just bang, 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 just keeping his feet moving. I think this is a guy that this late in the cycle, this is a guy that you're probably not taking a second running back in this class unless you really like Jaden Jackson. Like if this is a guy like, damn, I can't believe we stole this kid. That's why you take a Jaden Jackson, take a second running back this late in the recruiting cycle when you've already got one and you've got a full running back room. The other, I said, I've thrown this theory out before. It feels it provides a little bit more credence to that theory. Like I said, I've got no inside info on this at all, but my theory that I threw out a few weeks ago was that given that Carson Hansen appears to have kind of taken that lead running back spot. That's that's who seems to be getting the most carries. And you got Dylan Lee coming up, River Peppers coming in, Aiden Flores got carries, and Abu Sama had a very up and down season. There was the Houston game, he had a nice game, he had some explosive runs, but he didn't necessarily take the step forward to be a dominant back like we maybe we thought he was going to, or thought he could anyways. Worth noting that when he got to Iowa State, the original position they wanted Abu Sama at was corner. And right now you've got Jontez Williams is solidified. You feel great about that as your number one corner. Abu Sama, right now you're trying to establish that second corner, figure out who that guy's going to be. There is a history, there is precedent with Iowa State converting skill players on offense to corner and them being very good. Darian Porter's a great example, was a receiver for a long time, moved over to corner for the last couple of years, and he's been fabulous. And he will probably he might be a day 2 pick in the NFL, depending on what his combine looks like. There's precedent there for taking really good athletes from the offensive side, moving them to corner to, or even just to the defensive side of the ball to fill a need. We know Abu was originally, they wanted him to be a corner to start off before he just kind of showed out at running back in practice. So he's got, he's got experience at the position. They believe he can play that at the Big 12 level. I'm not saying he's gonna. I don't know if it's even necessarily been talked about. But the idea that Abu Sama may be getting ready to switch sides of the ball to corner gets a little bit more of a solid foundation to that theory when you take a second running back this late in the cycle, when you already have so many guys in the room that got carries last year. Again, I have no inside info on this. I could be dead wrong. And if I am, it is what it is. Sometimes you're just wrong. Sometimes in sports, sometimes you're just wrong. And it happens, and I'm okay with that. But I think it's an interesting theory. I wouldn't say I would not oppose that whatsoever. Alexander was an incredible athlete, and I think if the coaching staff believes they can flip him to the other side of the ball and turn him into an elite corner, more power to him. Because then you can have Jaden, you can have potentially Abu Sama right across the corner from Jontez Williams, who was a ball hawk last year. He's going to be a fabulous corner. Like, I would think right now, Jontez Williams would be like a dark horse to be a first team All Big 12 guy next year, because I think he's that good. So it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out through spring. I'm sure it wouldn't shock me if they at least try him at corner through spring, just to see if maybe he's the second best corner on the team and they just been using him at running back. We'll see there. Either way, that position group with Hank Poteet and Deion Broomfield at safety, at the safeties, I think they've got a good handle on that secondary. The secondary is always good. So it'll be interesting to watch. But Jaden Jackson is a guy that I'm really, really intrigued by. The high school production in Texas, so it's a good state. He's playing against good competition. That kind of production at the high school level is unusual. And it shows you that some guys just get the job done. Some guy, like you look at, there's so many of these guys that come out of Iowa, especially, where they don't jump off the page necessarily as a special athlete, or they're not, they're not a physical freak or anything. But, in high school, they're just wildly productive players. And sometimes it's because, the competition maybe they're playing 8-man football in Iowa, and it's just not great competition. So sometimes they just, guys that are just decent look really great against bad competition. But there's a lot of times where you get these guys that are just incredibly productive in high school, but they don't necessarily have, elite speed, or an elite, for quarterbacks, an elite arm, or don't have elite size, something like that. So they don't necessarily stand out to a blue chip program, but they just get the job done. Carson Hansen for Iowa State was a guy that in high school just got the job done. Like I said, he doesn't necessarily jump off the page as a special athlete or anything like that, but he just gets the job done. And that's what a program like Iowa State needs, is guys that can bring their lunch pail, get the job done. And I think Jaden Jackson is one of those guys. So, just a quick one. The other commit is a defensive lineman. I'm trying I had his name written off to the side for BJ Carter, defensive lineman from Middlesburg, Florida. He's a 86 overall. Let me pull up his profile here real quick. Doo-doo-doo. So he's a mid 3-star guy. Got some okay offers. East Carolina, Florida Atlantic. It's all G5 stuff down in the area. But generally speaking, this is another guy where the class was fine where it was. Getting guys this late in the game is a move to say this is a guy that we maybe are surprised that was here available. Usually when you see a guy this late and that's this late of a commit, it's because they really wanted him. That they see the guy on tape and they're like, we want this guy on the roster. This isn't it's not a ratings play. It's none of that. This is a guy that you take because you want on the roster, especially when you've got a basically a full class up to this point. I think it's an interesting signing for Iowa State. There's not a lot of tape on it. I mean, I could probably go, I could go find a huddle page, but not a lot of like immediate tape like there is with Jaden Jackson, just because he's, one of the most productive running backs in Texas high school history. But 2 late signings to finish out that class. And I think Iowa State is definitely done with this class. I don't think they're going to get any like summer commitments or anything like that. If they do, it's because it was an academic issue or something. So next thing I want to go is just kind of take a real quick peek at the 2026 class. 1 second here. I had it pulled up and I accidentally closed the tab. Also, if anybody's got any questions so far about anything I've talked about, definitely feel free to ask them. Love answering questions. So let's go to the 2026 football recruiting class. For anybody that is watching this game and is also paying attention, I would say it's now open up a 57-43 lead on UCF midway through the second half. So that's good to see them start pulling away there. So I would say it's got a couple commitments early on. Mylan Paris, receiver from the St. Louis area, that size right there, or sorry, not St. Louis. He's from Ohio, from Stowe, Ohio, which I want to say that's up kind of by Cleveland. Let's just look it up. Stowe, Ohio is, up by Cleveland, the Akron area. So actually it'd be very close to where Matt Campbell's from. There's Stowe there, and I believe Massillon is right in this area as well. So that's actually right in Matt Campbell's territory. So it wouldn't shock me if he knew, Mylan's coach back in, Mylan's high school coach and had connections back there. So that's a good one there. Mylan Paris, the thing that immediately jumps off the page though is that size, 6'5", 200. Recently you haven't seen Iowa State go after a lot of those big tall trees like they used to, where they had Alan Lazard and Hakeem Butler, and then you had Sean Shaw was a guy out of Oklahoma, and then there was he never played at Iowa State, but Tristan Michaud came out of Canada. He was kind of thought to be maybe the next in line for that big tall archetype of receiver. But they've got Mylan Paris now. He's got a Cincinnati offer there, not a ton of big time offers, a lot of MAC stuff. There's a Kentucky offer there. Wisconsin offer. So, like some decent programs. He's probably a developmental process, 6'5", 200. So he's probably a little bit lankier. Interesting guy though. And having a guy like this, he's committed already, which means I would be shocked if he's not here for spring football in 2026. So, interesting prospect there. And then there's another one down here. Caleb Francois, a running back out of Minnetonka, Minnesota. Not currently ranked. Just got the North Dakota offer, but he committed really early. Just committed actually last week. So he's committed well ahead of his junior season. He committed on his junior day, I believe. So this is a guy that, like I said, the running back room is a little bit of a log jam right now, but for the most part, any guy that they've thrown out, they've generally speaking done a really good job recruiting running backs. There hasn't really been any. There's been a couple that have been not as great. Like Cartavius Norton was kind of a bust, but he was also not a super high rank or anything like that. He was kind of a guy that we took, and we thought when his freshman season, he got a couple carries. I'm like, oh, this kid's really interesting. And they just didn't pan out. He couldn't stay healthy. And then Eli Sanders was fine. Went to New Mexico, had a really good season. Now he's at USC, which is interesting. So, but for the otherwise, for the most part, Iowa State has a good legacy of recruiting running backs and producing good running backs. So, I'm fine with anybody they want to take at that position. I believe those are the only two commitments for the 2026 class. You got a couple of guys. I do want to look though at the state of Iowa because, Iowa's got an interesting. There's not a lot of like high end Division I prospects in the state this time around, but there's a couple notable names here. First one being the top ranked player in the state, Evan Jacobson. And he's from Waukee. That name may sound familiar because he is the younger brother of Michael Jacobson, who obviously played basketball at Iowa State, and is now currently and played professional basketball in Croatia for a year, and then randomly showed up in the NFL as a tight end, and he's still in the NFL. He spent a few years with the Seahawks, and I think he went to the Falcons maybe for a year. Actually, I could tell you. He went to the Colts. He was with the Seahawks for a year, Colts for 3 years, and now he's with the Saints. So, Michael Jacobson, his older brother, has been sticking around, and his brother Evan Jacobson is a high end prospect. He's a full on blue chip prospect from the state of Iowa, 6'7", 220 at tight end, pretty much made in a lab to play at Iowa State. But obviously, because he is a blue chip prospect, you are going to be fighting off some teams. You can see he's got Auburn, Arkansas, Baylor, Colorado. I'm sure he's got offers from everybody: Florida State, Indiana, us, Kansas State, Louisville, LSU, Miami. Interesting that I don't see Iowa on here. I would kind of be shocked if Iowa is not looking at the number one recruit in the state that is a tight end, but maybe they just decided that they just don't have a shot on him. I don't know. But what I do know is that Iowa State's going to get as good a shot at Evan Jacobson as anybody. You're right there. You've got his brother came here. He's in the backyard. Iowa State's got a great recent legacy with tight ends. This is a guy I think Iowa State will go. I think they're going to push hard after Evan Jacobson. Jaden McGregory is another guy. He's out of Valley, West Des Moines Valley, and Des Moines. Obviously, a big for anybody from Iowa. That's anybody in Iowa already knows this, but anybody outside of Iowa, West Des Moines Valley is one of the best. Consistently one of the best football programs in Iowa. And they actually just got a recruit out of the 2025 class in Xavier Robinson. If we go back to the 2025 class where Iowa State did really well. Let's see if I can pull the state rankings here. Iowa State did pretty dang well in the state. Got a good chunk of the good recruits here. But Xavier Robinson is one down here that took a receiver out of Valley. So it's former teammate. This is a guy that I don't know what we'll see from him as a true freshman, but this is a guy I'm very interested to see what happens with him for this upcoming season, to see if they'll find a way to get him the ball on the field. But, you've got a teammate there, local kid. This is obviously a guy that they're going to go after, but he's got some nice offers. He's got a Georgia offer right there. So that's notable. How committable that is, I don't know, but he's obviously got offers from everybody, except for Iowa, because apparently Iowa thinks they're too good for a 4-star athlete from Des Moines, but offers from all the local-ish schools. And then that big one from Georgia. So, if Iowa State can land either of those guys, that's a huge win. Because typically you see some guys like this typically end up going out of state because they are if they're really high end, like elite blue chip prospects, you typically see that believe they have a really high end like NFL future. A lot of times you see those guys go out of state, even away from Iowa and stuff like that. So landing either of these two guys, I think, is a huge win for Iowa State. If you can somehow land both, this would be the best. You're on pace for the best class in school history. A couple other guys, this Julian Manson, I would assume he's probably going to end up at Iowa. He's from Iowa City. Yeah, he's gonna end up at Iowa. I'm guessing he's probably a safety or a linebacker. He's probably a linebacker at 6'4", 215. He's probably a linebacker. But you got a number of these guys though here that are interesting athletes. There's not a ton of D1 prospects in this particular class, but you've got a shot at a few of these. Um, you've got a linebacker here running. This 6'3", 195 is probably a linebacker, maybe a running back. So there's not a lot in the state, but the couple guys right here at the top, you want these two guys real bad. Evan Jacobson should be priority number one for this recruiting class. He just should be. The tight end room has depth, and there's some really interesting young talent there. But when you can get a guy like this that's a full on blue chip prospect at one of your premium positions on offense, he's a local kid, he's an Iowa State legacy. You gotta have this kid. I don't know what the situation, like if he's looking for NIL or what. Obviously I'm not in this kid's head. I have never talked to him, but I would think Iowa State has a good shot at him. This has to be priority number one for 2026. Period. Evan Jacobson has to be your priority. But we'll see. He's got some good offers. In the same way you'd like to see Jaden McGregor, but he's got that Georgia offer and a couple other really big time SEC offers as well. So. And sometimes it's hard to turn down the Georgia football machine. But, outside the state, it's still really early in the class. Even like the targets right now for Iowa State are going to be fairly gray. It's there's still going to be a lot of guys that are going to show up on their senior tape that I would say will offer throughout the summer and fall. They'll get on visits. So this offer list is certainly not comprehensive at all. Jeffrey Roberts, I forgot about him. He's a receiver from Ames. I believe he'll be a walk-on. But I would say it has a decent history with walk-on receivers. Obviously, Carson Brown out of Ankeny this year played a lot of snaps. Feel really good about that. So I would say it has a good, proud history of the walk-on program. I don't know what that looks like going forward with the new scholarship limits and the new roster size limits, or not. It's really not new scholarship limits, but new roster size limits. The walk-on programs at any school are going to get a lot more exclusive, where you're only really going to be able to hang on to like your very highest end of walk-on players. You got to really they got to be guys that are like fringe good enough to be scholars, that maybe good enough to be scholarship players, but just, they're just log jammed right there, whatever it is. That's a whole nother situation going forward that is going to be difficult to deal with. And I think we're going to see a lot more movement from that after spring ball, when we see which guys are rising and falling. If guys don't see themselves moving up the depth chart and roster sizes are shrinking, at a certain point, Iowa State is just going to have to cut guys because they just can't have that many people on the roster. But, that'll be a weird situation to monitor going forward. And it's going to affect, the 2026 recruiting class is going to be the first one that is affected by revenue sharing, and the first that is going to be, affected by revenue sharing for their entire career, and is also going to be the first one affected by these, roster limits right off the bat, as far as how many guys each school takes in each class, things like that. Recruiting has been such a weird situation the last few years, especially with the transfer portal. Kind of, it seems like a de-emphasis in general on high school recruiting. Take the blue chips you can, but it's much more prevalent than basketball, where one-year transfer guys can come in and make a big impact, and can one transfer player can be the difference between a team being a bubble team and being an Elite Eight or a Final Four team. Maybe not a Final Four team, but being a Sweet 16 or an Elite Eight team after being a bubble team the previous year. One transfer can make that difference. And for football, maybe if you got a really great quarterback, maybe that's the difference between 7 wins and a conference championship. But for the most part, one player just can't individually change the game enough to do that. But even in football, we're still seeing it where you have a little bit of a de-emphasis on high school recruiting, and sometimes, and for the fans, it's a little bit harder too, because when you have guys leave after a year or two, they get stuck behind the depth chart or whatever it is. Maybe it's an NIL situation that they they just kind of leave. They just kind of leave out of nowhere, and sometimes it's hard to get invested as a fan in a particular player because you just don't know how long they're going to be around. Now, if you've got an elite player that's starting as a freshman and you know they're going to stick around for at least a few years, that's great. But even now, at a program like Iowa State, Iowa State has done a better job than almost all other Power Five programs as far as hanging on to retaining star power, retaining their stars. Rocco Becht, obviously Dominique Orange, Jalen Knoll, and all these guys have had lots of opportunities to go other places. But Iowa State is not immune to losing a player to the portal for NIL reasons or for a bigger, better opportunity, whatever it is. It's still one of those where you look at if Iowa State has let's just say Xavier Robinson, for example. Let's say that Xavier Robinson comes in this spring, has a huge spring practice. He's going to be a starter this fall, and he takes off and he's lighting the world on fire. One, you're like, this is great. Xavier Robinson's awesome. I hope, I hope he stays around. The first thing that now, because of the transfer portal, between, and not having any sit outs in transfers at all with NIL and how all that is, and we're now revenue sharing. When you have a star player that's not about ready to graduate or go pro, when you have a star player that shows up and has an amazing season and they're going to still be in college next season, any fan now, unless you are Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, Alabama, LSU, maybe, you are immediately afraid that player is going to leave. And, like I said, Iowa State has done a good job of retaining those kinds of guys, but I'm not, I think it would be naive to sit there and pretend like I said, Xavier Robinson, or let's say, let's say, Rocco's a bad example. I don't know. Let's say Jontez Williams has a crazy season this year. He gets 8 picks or something like that. And he's projected, going into, after next season, going to the draft and being like a first round pick, whatever it is. I mean, I think you'd be naive to not at least be like a little worried that he would go someplace else. Cause you'd be afraid that an SEC school would come in and offer him, high 6 figures, maybe 7 figures to go transfer there. And we know that Iowa State guys have gotten huge numbers for. We know TJ Tampa got offered a bunch of money to go to the SEC. We know that Dominique Orange has been offered money. We know that other guys have been offered money. Craig McDonald got offered money to go to Auburn and took it. That did not work out for him at all. But aside from him getting paid, but it's just kind of the interesting thing. But it's early for this class. This list of targets is not comprehensive, but I think you can clearly look at this and identify Evan Jacobson as priority number 1. Jaden McGregor, he's maybe priority 1B. You still want to, even if there's not a lot of high-end prospects in the state, you still want to have your you still want to have your fingerprints on the top end of the state recruiting class every year. Even if you can't get the majority or you can't get the highest ranked one, you still need to grab at least a few to keep your footprint in the state. Because like Matt Campbell said when he got here, is he wants to establish a 6-hour recruiting radius and say, we want to own this 6-hour recruiting radius. So that goes over into Wisconsin, that goes over to Milwaukee and around. It goes up to the Twin Cities. It goes over, it goes down to St. Louis and Kansas City. And it goes over into Nebraska and things like that, and over into Illinois and into even parts of Indiana. And then obviously they've got all those ties to Ohio as a staff. So trying to own that area, and you need to hit that footprint, that main footprint every year, and try to get as much as you can. Every class you're going to take somebody from Texas, you're going to take some people from Florida. That's just how you're going to do it, because those states have some of the, have the best college football in the country. California, Florida, Texas, Georgia, I think are generally considered like inarguably maybe the 4 best. I'm sure you could talk about Pennsylvania and Ohio, whatever. There's lots of good states. But you're gonna see Texas and probably Florida in every class. But I would say the majority of your roster is gonna be Wisconsin, Iowa, Minnesota, Missouri, Kansas, Ohio. A huge chunk of your Michigan. Huge chunk of your roster is going to be from those states. And that's okay. Lots of winning programs have won national titles from rosters built in that area. I would say it's not a national title team, not a national title caliber program just yet, but hopefully they can be a Big 12 title caliber program this season. The schedule sets up nice for them. So be interesting to watch. We'll see a lot more offers go out for this class over the next 6 months. We'll see more visits coming up in the fall. Going to be an interesting one to watch, but I think we're going to probably about wrap her up for this week. Iowa State is currently up 11 points with just over 2 minutes left down in Orlando. They had a 15-point lead at one point. UCF is kind of trying to battle back here. We'll see. 2 minutes left. I mean, I hope Iowa State hangs on to this, but we'll see. But anyways, everybody, thank you for watching. Appreciate anybody taking the time to watch us during the Iowa State basketball game. Any of you that are not Iowa State fans and are just tuning in because I went live and because it looks interesting, I appreciate you tuning in. I hope you guys are enjoying some Iowa State coverage, and maybe it's a program that you're not used to following. But I hope to see everybody here on a weekly basis, every week here, Tuesdays at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern. One thing I do want to remind you guys of is that next Tuesday, the 17th, next Monday, the 17th, we have a big stream going on the main channel, the main Voice of College Football Network. It is the definitive Ohio State versus Michigan debate. The OSU Michigan everything.
Ohio State, Michigan, the greatest rivalry in sports deserves the greatest debate in sports. Monday, February 17th at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on the main channel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan all-everything debate with me, taking your calls all night if it takes all night. I'm pulling no punches, so beware. Bring your best intel. It's the Ohio State, Michigan all-everything debate. It will be epic. February 17th, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Be there.
So that's what's coming up next week. So like I said, everybody, appreciate you guys for all tuning in. We'll be here every week, every Tuesday here going forward. As we get more into the offseason, we get closer to spring practice, we'll cover some of that a little bit. I've got some interesting interviews lined up. I'm also currently working on finding a co-host, so it's not just me rambling up here. I'm sure you guys get sick of me just talking about myself the whole time. So we're going to keep building out the show. For anybody that's new that's watching, we'd appreciate if you're on YouTube. Appreciate if you like and subscribe to this video. It helps us kind of get the algorithm to notice us a little bit and get the video out there, because obviously YouTube is a very crowded place at the moment. So we want to try to get as many eyeballs on this as we can, just to keep building this community, because I think I would say it's going to be a fun team to follow in 2026, especially starting the season in Ireland. We'll have definitely some coverage there. I will be in Ireland for the game, for the Kansas State game. So I will have some sort of coverage from there that week. Maybe I don't know. I'll have to be up at 2:00 in the morning, I think, to do a live show from there. So we'll see what happens, but we'll have some sort of coverage from Ireland as well. So, but throughout this whole offseason, we're going to do lots of interesting things. Like I said, I've got some interviews coming down the pipeline that should be pretty fun. So thank you everybody again for watching. We will see you again next Tuesday at 7 p.m. Central Time, 8 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Voice of College Football Network for Iowa State.